That worn-out sweater your mom made you put on when you complained about the cold. The bread bags you wore inside your boots on snow days. The pliers sitting on top of the TV because the channel knob broke off in 1973 and nobody bothered to replace it. The 1970s weren't about keeping up with the Joneses, they were about keeping the lights on, the fridge stocked with whatever was on sale, and your pride intact even when your shoes had more duct tape than leather. From generic cereal boxes that looked like they came from a government warehouse to aluminum foil that saw more reuses than a hand-me-down winter coat, growing up without much money in the 1970s taught us lessons you can't learn from a textbook. So join us as we explore 10 signs you grew up poor in the 1970s and survived anyway. The reputation of an entire generation is at stake as we look back at what it really meant to stretch a dollar when gas was rationed, jobs were scarce, and making do wasn't just a choice, it was survival. These weren't the glory days you see in nostalgia montages. For millions of families, the 1970s meant creative problem-solving, resourcefulness that bordered on genius, and a kind of toughness that came from knowing how to live without. What we called poverty back then built character, taught resilience, and created memories that are equal parts painful and hilarious. This wasn't about deprivation for the sake of it. It was about families doing whatever it took to get by, and somehow, against all odds, we came out stronger on the other side. If your breakfast table featured a plain white box with black block letters spelling out cornflakes or sweetened puffed rice, congratulations. You were part of the generic cereal club. No cartoon mascots, no colorful packaging, no toy surprises buried at the bottom. Just stark, utilitarian boxes that seemed to shout, "We are saving money and we are not ashamed." The cereal inside tasted like cardboard with a hint of disappointment, which is why the sugar bowl became your best friend. You would pour half a cup of sugar over those bland flakes just to make them remotely edible. Meanwhile, the kids at school bragged about Cap'n Crunch and Lucky Charms while you quietly crunched your way through another bowl of toasted oats. But here's the thing. That generic cereal taught you early on that brand names were a luxury, not a necessity. You learned to find satisfaction in what you had, even if what you had tasted like packing material. And somehow, you survived. You did not get scurvy, you did not waste away, and years later you can laugh about the fact that your childhood breakfast came in packaging that looked like it was designed by someone who had given up on joy entirely. Your family's refrigerator told a story, and that story was written on the sides of old butter tubs, margarine containers, and Cool Whip bowls. Open the fridge and you would find a dozen identical plastic containers, none of which actually contained what the label promised. Was it leftover spaghetti? Chili from last Tuesday? A science experiment that had been sitting there so long it had developed its own ecosystem? You never really knew until you pried off that lid and took a cautious sniff. This was your mom's recycling program long before recycling was trendy. She would wash out every tub, stack them neatly, and deploy them like Tupperware without the price tag. If you dared to throw one away, you would hear about it. She would say, "Do you know how much those cost, even though they cost nothing, because they came free with the margarine?" But that was the point. Waste was the enemy. Every container had value. Every lid had a purpose. And if you could not see that, you clearly did not understand how this house worked. Looking back, those butter tubs were more than storage. They were symbols of ingenuity and thriftiness, and a refusal to let anything useful go to waste. Bread bags were sacred in a 1970s household that was watching every penny. Once that last slice was gone, the bag was not trash, it was a resource. Your mom would shake out the crumbs, fold it up neatly, and tuck it into a drawer already bursting with other bread bags, twist ties still attached. Those bags became sandwich holders, makeshift gloves for messy tasks, emergency rain covers, and most memorably, boot liners. When the snow came down heavy and your boots had more holes than sole, you would slip a bread bag over each sock before jamming your foot into that damp, freezing boot. It worked, sort of. Your feet stayed drier than they would have otherwise, even if you looked ridiculous and crinkled with every step. And then there was the heel of the loaf, that dense, awkward end piece nobody really wanted. In a house with money, it might have gone to the dog or the trash. In your house, it went on your plate. You ate it as toast, used it as a hamburger bun, or squished it down into a sandwich and pretended it was normal. Waste not, want not. That was the law, and the bread bag drawer was the evidence. If you grew up poor in the 70s, personal space was a luxury you read about in books. Bedrooms were shared, mattresses were doubled up, and if your family was really strapped, you might have slept 3 or 4 to a bed. You learned to sleep foot to head, curled up on your side, or sprawled across whatever section of the bed your sibling was not currently occupying. Blankets were a nightly battleground. Someone always hogged them, someone always kicked in their sleep, and someone, without fail, would wake up on the floor by morning. And if one of you had an accident in the night, well, that was everybody's problem now. You would wake up damp, confused, and deeply annoyed. But there was no switching beds, no guest room, no escape. You would just strip the sheets, flip the mattress if you were lucky, and try again tomorrow. But as miserable as it sounds, sharing a bed made you close. You learned to negotiate, to compromise, to sleep through snoring, and to forgive your sibling for stealing your pillow in the middle of the night. It was not comfortable, but it was home. And somehow, that was enough. In the 1970s, if your family TV still had both of its original channel knobs, you were living large. For the rest of us, changing the channel meant grabbing a pair of pliers from the junk drawer, clamping down on the little metal nub where the knob used to be, and twisting with all your might. Sometimes you got shocked. Sometimes the channel would not budge. Sometimes you had to stand there holding the pliers in place while someone else adjusted the antenna on top of the set. TV watching was a full-body workout and a team effort. One person held the antenna, another twisted the pliers, and a third person stood across the room yelling, "That's it! Hold it right there!" Only to have the picture dissolve into static the second anyone moved. There was no remote control, no channel guide, no streaming options. You watched whatever came in clear enough to see, and you were grateful for it. If the picture was snowy, you lived with it. If the sound crackled, you turned it up. And if the TV finally died, you did not replace it, you just stopped watching TV. That's how poor worked. But here's where it gets interesting. These were not signs of failure. They were proof that your family knew how to survive. Every reused piece of foil, every bread bag, boot liner, every shared bed and butter tub full of mystery leftovers was a quiet rebellion against a world that said you needed money to be happy. You did not. You just needed duct tape, a sense of humor, and a mom who could stretch $1 further than seemed physically possible. And that lesson, the one about making do, about fixing instead of replacing, about gratitude instead of greed, and that lesson stuck. It shaped how you see the world, how you spend money, how you value things. It made you tougher, scrappier, and more resourceful than people who grew up with everything handed to them. If something broke in your house, you did not call a repairman. You grabbed the tape. Duct tape, masking tape, scotch tape, electrical tape, whatever was in the junk drawer became the solution to every problem. Shoes falling apart, tape them. Toy car missing a wheel, tape it back on. Rip in the couch, slap some tape over it and throw a blanket on top. The TV antenna wobbly, tape. The bookshelf leaning, more tape. Your parents were not just handy, they were tape engineers. They could stabilize furniture, patch clothing, and hold together entire sections of the house with nothing but a roll of silver adhesive and sheer determination. And the wildest part, it worked. That taped-up shoe would last another 6 months. That bookshelf would stand for years. Your dad would even brag about it. He would say, "Good as new," admiring his handiwork like he had just rebuilt the engine on a 1967 Mustang. It was not about being cheap. It was about refusing to throw something away when it could still be useful. In a world that is constantly telling you to buy new, replace, upgrade, that kind of mindset feels almost revolutionary now. Let's be real for a second. McDonald's was a fantasy. You would drive past those golden arches, nose pressed to the window, stomach growling, and your parents would keep on driving like nothing happened. Going to McDonald's was not a casual Tuesday thing. It was rare. It was a birthday thing, a report card thing, a road trip thing, where there was literally nowhere else to stop. Even when you did get to go, it was an event. The Happy Meal was divvied up like rations. Fries were shared. Ketchup packets were counted. The burger was savored, not scarfed. That paper bag went home with you because maybe, just maybe, it could be reused for something. Meanwhile, kids at school talked about going to McDonald's like it was no big deal, like their parents just pulled in whenever they felt like it. You stayed quiet. You did not mention that your last McDonald's trip was 8 months ago, and you still remembered every bite. But you know what? That scarcity made it special. When you finally did get that cheeseburger, it tasted better than anything else in the world, because you had waited for it, dreamed about it, earned it. That is something that kids who went every week will never understand. If you thought throwing away aluminum foil after one use was normal, you clearly did not grow up in a house where every cent mattered. Foil was an investment. After you used it to cover leftovers or bake a casserole, you did not toss it. You carefully peeled it off, wiped it down, smoothed out the wrinkles, and folded it back into the drawer like it was fine linen. That same piece of foil might have wrapped meatloaf on Monday, covered a bowl of green beans on Wednesday, and been used to line a baking sheet on Friday. If it tore, you patched it with another piece. If it got too crinkled, you flattened it under a book. And if it finally wore out after a month of service, only then, with great ceremony, would it be retired? This was not just about saving money. It was about respect. Respect for resources, for the work it took to earn them, and for the idea that nothing should be wasted if it still had life left in it. Your mom did not see a piece of foil. She saw 5 more uses, 10 more meals, a dozen more ways to stretch what little she had. When you were thirsty in the summer, you did not grab a bottle of water from the fridge. You went outside, turned on the garden hose, and drank straight from the source. That hose had been sitting in the sun all day, so the first few seconds were warm, rubber-flavored, and vaguely suspicious. But you let it run until the water turned ice cold, and then you gulped it down like you had just crossed the desert. No one worried about germs. No one checked if the hose was food safe. You shared it with your siblings, your neighbors, the dog, whoever was around. It tasted like summer, like grass clippings and chlorine and freedom, and somehow you survived. You did not get sick. You did not develop mysterious illnesses. You just got hydrated, wiped your mouth on your shirt, and went back to playing until the streetlights came on. The thermostat wasn't just a dial on the wall. It was a test of character. If you said you were cold, your mom didn't turn up the heat. She pointed at the closet and said, "Put on a sweater." If you dared touch the thermostat without permission, you were met with a look that could freeze water. The house could be 50 degrees, and your dad would still be proud of himself for keeping the bill low. You'd see your breath in the living room, pile on layers like you were prepping for an Arctic expedition, and your parents would act like this was perfectly normal. "We're not heating the whole neighborhood," your dad would say, as if leaving the thermostat at a livable temperature would somehow cause the heat to leak out into the street. But you adapted. You learned to sleep under 3 blankets, wear 2 pairs of socks, and accept that being warm was a privilege, not a right. And when you finally moved out and got your own place, the first thing you did was crank that thermostat up to 72 degrees and bask in the glory of warmth without guilt. The most notorious failure of all wasn't actually a failure. It was the way we were taught to see poverty itself. Society told us that not having money made us less than, that using butter tubs and bread bags and reused foil was something to be embarrassed about. But the truth is, growing up poor in the 1970s didn't make us weak. It made us survivors. It taught us to solve problems, to value what we had, and to find joy in the smallest things. Those lessons didn't break us. They built us. Every taped-up shoe, every shared bed, every generic cereal breakfast was a masterclass in resilience. We learned that you don't need money to be happy. You just need a little creativity, a lot of determination, and a family that refuses to give up. And that's a legacy worth holding on to. Looking back, being poor in the 1970s wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. It shaped who we became, how we think, and what we value. We learned that things don't define us, that relationships matter more than possessions, and that a little duct tape can fix just about anything. We survived not because life was easy, but because we were tougher than the circumstances we were born into. And now, decades later, we can look back and laugh at the bread bag boots, the butter tub leftovers, and the pliers on the TV. Because those weren't signs of failure. They were badges of honor, proof that we made it through, stronger and wiser, with a lifetime of stories that no amount of money could ever buy.